Welcome back to Sci-Fi Book Trek. Today we deal with the Robert A. Heinlein story, The Man Who Sold the Moon.
Short story collection. Right, this book contains 6 stories. Most of them short, except for one, which is The Man Who Sold the Moon, the title, which is almost half the book, just under.
All of the stories contained in the book are from Heinlein's Future History series of work.
Now, these stories were written between 1949 and 1950. Now, let's move over to the author section.
Robert Anson Heinlein, American science fiction author, born in Butler, Missouri in 1907.
On a quick side note, the Butler city was founded in 1852, which means this book was published almost 100 years after that the city was created.
Neat. Heinlein attended the United States Naval Academy, where he attained equivalent qualifications to a Bachelor of Arts in Engineering. After graduation, he was commissioned as an ensign in the Navy, and he continued to serve until 1934, where he was discharged for disability reasons, having achieved the rank of lieutenant. He turned to writing in 1939 with his first published story, Lifeline, which was originally written for a writing contest in the science fiction novel Amazing Science Fiction.
Yeah, well, there was a contest going on, and from a different publisher. He was thinking of entering it, and they were charging, I think, 50 cents a word. But before doing that, he sent it into, was it Astounding Stories?
Astounding, yes. Sorry.
Yes, that's Astounding Stories, and they charged $1 a word. So he made $70 on that story, which is, in today's money, the equivalent of about $1,500.
Heinlein's notable works include the novel Starship Troopers, which in itself is a major influence on the space marine and mecha genres of science fiction.
Yeah, I would also add that one of his biggest work is also A Stranger in a Strange Land.
He would die in 1988 from emphysema and heart failure. The collected works, as we're seeing it today, were published in 1950. However, we're dealing with the Great Britain publication date, so we've decided to go for 1953 as our publication year.
This is mostly because we've recently done 1950 with Isaac Asimov's I, Robot collection. So we decided to go with the Great Britain first publication year, 1953.
So as not to bore anyone.
And to have something more to say.
And with that said, on to the publication year.
Yes. The first obvious one is Queen Elizabeth II is crowned.
Okay, well that marks one off my list.
I figured it would. It was an easy one, and figured everyone.
Longest reigning monarch in UK history.
Yes.
And unfortunately passed away last year.
Yes.
Which, pretty bloody good innings.
Yeah, when you get everything paid for you.
Well, yes.
And taken care of.
So, my first one would have been the same. However, if we go on to my second, it's the end of the Korean War.
How lovely.
It was a fairly significant event.
Yes. I'm sure it was.
But it also means that I can make MASH jokes.
While you're writing, make note of the fact that thanks to the failure of the world's various elected heads, not to mention just plain dictators, to keep a Cold War from turning hot, I am forced to operate alongside a surgeon who can't trim his toenails without committing malpractice.
I resent that. How do you know he meant you?
People born in this year would be, well, notable person would be Frederick Allen Moranis, aka Rick Moranis.
I knew it. I'm surrounded by assholes.
Keep firing, assholes!
Another one for the Star Trek people, Cole Meany.
Chief O'Brien.
Yes.
I am Chief Miles Edward O'Brien. I'm very much alive and I intend to stay that way.
I'm in. Let's get it done.
Films released in this year.
I know which one you're going for first. You've probably seen my list on them.
I don't know. My first one is Petit Film Thunderbolt.
I say, is this a normal hazard of railway travel?
Also in this year, Invaders from Mars.
Father turned against son.
War of the Worlds.
Invaders from Mars.
A general of the army becomes a saboteur.
Okay, because War of the Worlds was out this year as well.
Yes, but I ignored that. For me, Invaders from Mars. Now, if you've ever seen like sci-fi clips of films, they normally clip where it's sort of this green silvery alien with like tentacles underneath in a transparent ball with a kid banging on it going, "Give me my mummy back." That is from this film. It's classic scene. Anyway, my third film. Now, there's reason for this with the last story. Abbott and Costello meet Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Bud Abbott and Lou Costello meet Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Co-starring Boris Karloff as Robert Louis Stevenson's fabulous double demon.
Okay, yeah.
Right, now, do you have any films?
War of the Worlds.
This could be the beginning of the end for the human race. For what men first thought were meteors or the often ridiculed flying saucers are in reality the flaming vanguard of the invasion from Mars.
Gentlemen prefer blondes.
I just love finding new places to wear diamonds.
And finally, Calamity Jane.
Here they be, how's about a welcome? A peaceful sort of welcome for the gang.
On that note, we'll go on to what's inside the book. Right, so we'll give a brief review of each story and what we thought of it. So, first of all, first story on the list is
Lifeline.
I mean, it's all about a inventor who finds a way to determine when a person's life will end and the ramifications of that to some extent.
The scientific community wants to call him a quack, and there's
yes, and then there's like big business who wants to do other things to him.
Very much vested interest in watching him fail.
Yes.
And that is an interesting theme.
Yeah, it does seem a criticism on capitalism in a way. Especially American capitalism with its lobbying system and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a theme that will permeate through a few other...
Yes, which is interesting seeing as this was written like 1949.
Yeah.
Actually, no, 1939.
Yeah,
sorry.
This was the earlier one.
This was written in 1939. So, yeah, that is very interesting to see. It's the first story Heinlein ever got published.
Yeah. It's somewhat disconnected from the other books in the collection,
Yeah.
I would say.
It does feel different from all the other stories. However, it is very clear why he was picked up as a writer. Because
yeah.
it is very good.
I mean, if this was his first story that he
Published.
written,
Yeah.
well, it gives you the impression from some of the research I did, this was the first story that he wrote, and he immediately got picked up.
Yeah. I mean, he's very good for a short story, it is. The next one, which is called
Let There Be Light,
which is about the invention of solar power. It is interesting to see how, I don't want to say progressive, but also not progressive it is.
Yes, it is.
It's like a dichotomy there.
Yeah, I mean, there are a few notable points within the book where you're going to have to deal with sexism and elements of racism, and this is the first story where that is evident, and it might rub up against someone. So, fair warning.
I mean, this definitely feels more of its time than, say, Ice Gasmossite Robot.
It's kind of pleasantly cynical in a way as well.
Yes. I would maybe say too cynical at points, but maybe not as cynical as the first story. But yeah, the next one.
The Roads Must Roll.
Which is also written in 1940.
Yes. So, because of the setting information that the oil has run out, essentially transport no longer really exists within the United States.
No cars and automobiles and stuff like that.
Yeah, no personal transport. So everything has to take place on moving
sidewalks, essentially.
Yeah.
Conveyor belts.
But to the extent where these things are hundreds of miles long.
Yeah.
And it's a story about what happens when the transport infrastructure realizes that they essentially own the keys to the kingdom because the entire country works on the back of their work. But I would also say that there's a touch of the absolute power corrupts absolutely theme.
Yes. The next story would be
Blow-ups happen.
This is all about people monitoring a nuclear pile.
Yes.
Essentially. That was the initial start of the story.
And the workers actually working on the pile are getting shunted to the side, essentially, and taken off the job because they have psychiatric issues that are causing them to fail out while they're doing their jobs.
I would say this is the most, I don't want to say hard sci-fi, but most technical, as it describes certain aspects of nuclear fusion and stuff like that, and like
fission.
But he was still working under information that was in the public sphere rather than what the military had. So it's interesting to see how far he went and what he did with it, and also how he explains all of it and how he explains how everything works. The next story is
The Man Who Sold the Moon.
And this is by far the largest story in the book.
Oh boy, yeah.
Now, this is all about a businessman who dreams of going to the moon.
But he's
a 100% businessman.
Yes. You can see the Ferengi dripping out of him.
Yes, it is very much capitalism ho.
But in that,
it's very interesting because sometimes it felt almost like a heist movie. Like he was doing heist setup parts, and I was like, this is interesting. Diabolically evil, maybe, but interesting.
There's the thing, thematically, it feels like it goes from all the evils of capitalism, all the evils of a capitalist robber baron.
Yeah.
And then by the end of it, you're thinking, actually, is this just a guy who's driven to accomplish his goals at any cost? Would this be seen differently if he wasn't such a capitalistic shit?
But anyway, we'll go on to the last story, which is probably the shortest out of all of them.
Requiem.
Basically, this involves the main character from The Man Who Sold the Moon when he's an old man. So, it's all about what he does in his twilight years, essentially.
Mm. But I didn't get the idea of any sort of deeper theme.
For me, it's more of a whimsy story than anything.
Mm.
I do appreciate it. And knowing that it was written before the main story, maybe that's affected my judgment on it. I do like it more. But it does start off with the epitaph of Robert Louis Stevenson.
Yeah.
On that note, I think we'll go on to
recommendations.
Yep. Ivan, so what do you think of it? Would you recommend it?
I'd recommend it.
All the stories, or would you say skip one or two?
Well, there's the thing. I would say it's worthwhile reading all of them because they all do they contribute to the greater whole. The solar panel story, for instance, is mentioned later on in the narrative to some of the other books. I think Lifeline's the only standalone one, and even that is sort of setting the stage thematically for something that will happen later on.
I mean, it is interesting. So the early stories, he seems to be, I wouldn't say anti-business and capitalism, but it seems more the evilness comes from business owners. And yet, the latest story, the 1951, The Man Who Sold the Moon, seems ambiguous whether the business people are evil or forced for good.
Yeah.
So it's interesting how over that 10 years, it seems like his viewpoint's changed.
Progress versus stagnation.
Yeah.
And that's where I think the deeper underlying theme of it comes. Even someone who's a scientist, who you could argue is a force for good, can still be guilty of stagnation if it doesn't make sense for their worldview to change based on new evidence. Whereas a man who is essentially a robber baron, or that's how he sort of comes across, he can still be a force for progress because he's pushed by his demons rather than dragged by his angels.
Yes. For me, the story I liked least was Blow-Ups Happen.
That was my favourite.
Yeah.
But I'm a techno-babber whore, so maybe that's just the problem.
I mean, I did really like Requiem, but that's probably because I've read, The Man Who Sold the Moon before it. So I think that's probably going to have to be my favourite. The main title.
I would have discounted Requiem as a story and more like a conclusion to Man Who Sold the Moon.
Well, I mean, is that the story you liked the least?
No, I think the story that I liked the least would have been Let There Be Light. And even that's not a bad story all told, but I think the cynical outlook, even though I am somewhat of a cynic myself, the cynical outlook kind of brought me down, and it's sort of like a recognition of, oh, well, that is actually how things happen, and the only way through is to sort of go round the side and not necessarily be able to beat the corporations, if that makes sense. I wouldn't recommend skipping any of them. I think read the whole book. Don't leave anything out.
Yeah, I fully recommend it as well.
The first half of it is better once you've completed the book, but you might find it a little bit hard to get into to start with. That's my viewpoint.
That's fine. Well, I think we'll end it there.
Yeah.
And on that note, it's available on Kindle.
It is available on Kindle and for a reasonable price. And it's the full short story collection as well. So, by all means, guys, pick up a copy of it if you haven't already.
Yep. Right then. So, we'll see you next week for Spoiler Talk. And week after that, we'll be doing another review for a different book. So, join us when you like. Bye.
Bye-bye. Not Lewis Stevenson, is it?
Yep. Robert Louis Stevenson.
Yeah.
Writer of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Kidnapped, and Treasure Island. And like a shitload poem, which has fallen out of favour for like 20th century, but being rediscovered currently.
You can't go to that low because you're not going to get picked up by the mic.
Yeah, I know. Sorry. that wasn't for them. That was for me.
Yeah.
To flex my ego. I know stuff. I'm Brady.
Christ, I thought I knew stuff before I started reading this.